going to be a rematch, I believe, but I'll get to that later. First of all, I'd like to deal with some of the comments. John Ship says, quite frankly, it's you that's talking rubbish. This openly Jewish person was clearly out to cause trouble where he would be declared the victim. Seems like he was successful. I thought the policeman showed great restraint and should be commended, not sacked, for preventing the trouble this person clearly wanted to start. Anti-Semitism, poppycock. Well, I think it's interesting to have a look at the follow-up report that Sky News have done, where they placed Gideon next to one of the leaders of the pro-Palestinian solidarity campaign, Ben Jamal, who is very reasonable, but I think he also has slightly got off on a wrong foot. But have a look at this. I'll interrupt where I can.
I think people would have seen the video. Let me say, first of all, the police officer in the video was entirely wrong to say that Mr. Falter being visibly Jewish would be a provocation. That's actually a smear against people marching. The reality is that every demonstration, there are many hundreds of Jewish people joining us, many in an organized Jewish bloc declaring themselves to be Jewish. Their presence is always warmly welcome. But the nature of the incident was not as Mr. Falter has tried to portray it. He suggested he was innocently going for a walk, came across the march and was asked to leave because he was openly Jewish. The reality was he came to the march with an entourage of 4 to 5 people and a film crew.
I think he's wrong in saying that Gideon appeared with his own film crew. I think the footage that we've got is from Sky News. It was filmed by Sky. It was not filmed by Gideon or by his, quote, crew.
An entourage of 4 to 5 people and a film crew sought to break through the stewards, physically pushes himself past the police in order to walk in front of the march to provoke and to try to stop it. He was trying to provoke a confrontation. That's what happened.
He says that is not the case at all. What he was doing was, which he's perfectly entitled to do, he'd been to the synagogue and then he wanted to go for a stroll and he was prevented from doing that because he's Jewish.
Well, I think the entire video of the incident is now available online. I think people should watch it. But I think people need also to be aware of who Mr. Falter is and the organization he represents. They're a deeply controversial organization. They were highly criticized shortly after they were set up by a parliamentary inquiry into anti-Semitism. They were criticized on the basis that they were deliberately conflating anti-Semitism with legitimate criticism of the actions of the Israeli state. They've also been heavily criticized for a stream of Islamophobic comments, including smears against the Mayor of London, and for using anti-Palestinian racist rhetoric. Since the marches have begun, the organization have tried to stop them. They've even called for the army to be brought onto the streets to stop the marches happening. Now they're using the tactic of coming to the marches, trying to provoke an incident so that they can say there are scenes of disorder and therefore the marches cannot go ahead. These are disgraceful antics. They should be shunned by anybody who believes in the right to protest and democratic freedoms.
Nevertheless, Ben, he and those with him, his film crew, whoever was with him, should be allowed to cross the road if they want to.
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, what he was actually doing was a counter-protest, and we would uphold. We have strong problems with Mr. Falter's political views. He believes it's legitimate for Israel to do exactly what it's doing at the moment. He's entitled to those views, however repugnant they might be to a whole section of people. He has a right to counter-protest. We uphold people's right to counter-protest. At most of the demonstrations, there are people who are counter-protesting. What he was trying to do was to claim he had the right to walk directly into the march. And if you watch the whole video, actually the police officer who was dealing with him, who made those remarks that were quite disgraceful, but what he was also trying to do was suggest to Mr. Falter a way in which he could get to where he claimed he wanted to get to by a different route. He didn't want to do that, and he had no intention of going anywhere else. He came deliberately to the march, as I say, with an entourage and a film crew, in order to provoke a confrontation so he could film it and then suggest that he was unsafe at the march.
He's with us. You want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I find that, I listened to part of that. I just find that absolutely astonishing. I was not going to try and provoke something. And if Ben Jamal thinks that I'm trying to provoke something, what exactly does he think I'm trying to provoke by being openly Jewish? It's his march. He has these marches constantly. I was not there to counter-protest. I was not there with film crews or anything of the sort. His march was being covered by film crews, including Sky's film crew, which filmed it. I was not there to counter-protest. I was simply Jewish in the vicinity of these marches. And what we know from 6 months of this is that at these marches, we see constant incidents of glorification of terrorism. We see people engaging in all sorts of anti-Semitic hatred, as I saw at that march then. And I didn't see anybody from the Palestine Solidarity campaigns, different stewarding teams. I didn't see anybody saying, for example, that the people shouting scum or disgusting or Nazis or anything of the sort at me. I didn't see any of them being remonstrated with by their fellow marchers. And this is what we see week after week after week. And it is no wonder that Jewish people are increasingly feeling that they cannot come into the centre of town, that they cannot be in the vicinity of these marches. And unfortunately, as I found out, that's true. It's not just a suspicion. It's not just a fear. It is absolutely true. OK,
Ben Jamal, right of reply?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, the narrative is entirely untrue. I would invite your viewers to go and watch the entire video. They will see exactly what happened, and Mr. Falter's organisation has come to try to disrupt every single one.
No, I'm sorry, that's not true. I have not been there at any of your demonstrations.
I didn't say you.
No, I'm sorry, this is not true. You also, I heard as I came on, I heard you saying all sorts of nonsense about what my views are. You do not know me. You do not know my views. And I'm afraid to say I have not been at your marches. You're trying to make out that this is something I do week in, week out. This is the first one of your marches that I have come across.
Right,
what rubbish you talk, man.
Can I speak without interruption from Mr. Falter?
Go on.
If you'd like to say something true.
What I actually said was your organisation has been at each one of the marches. I didn't say that you had been at each one of the marches. And I do know your views because you are the head of an organisation who is very clear about your views. And as I said, you have been widely criticised as an organisation for conflating anti-Semitism.
No, I'm sorry, you said, for example, that you started to talk about my views on Israel and things like that, things I have not spoken about publicly. So how can you possibly know my views? You make things up.
Well, Mr. Falter, you are the head of a campaigning organisation, so your views
so are you. And what about your organisation, which puts these marches on, where we've done polling now, which shows 90% of British Jews are afraid to come into city centres. What do you say about, for example, people dressed as Hamas terrorists at your demonstrations? What about that?
I don't know. I can carry on trying to talk over Mr. Falter, but if he could just be silent for a minute, and then I can make my points, and then I'll allow him to respond in any way he wishes to, rather than having him shout over me. His views are extremely well known, but the issue again that he's not dealing with, from the start of these marches, very early on, his organisation called for the army to be brought onto the streets. The issue is, the problem with Mr. Falter's presence was not that he is openly Jewish. He's not dealing with the fact that at every single march, there are thousands of Jewish people marching, many of them in an organised...
What rubbish.
They're in an organised block, in a Jewish block. They are warmly welcomed at every demonstration. Some of them have put out public statements disassociating themselves with what Mr. Falter and his organisation were doing at the last march. So that's...
Let him come back to you on that.
First of all, I don't want to continue having a conversation with Ben Jamal. I'm happy to have an interview with you, but I don't want to carry on.
You did want to come on and talk.
Right. No. I'm not criticising UK.
That you wanted to have the conversation.
I did want to.
Final thought from you then, Ben Jamal, if I may. hold on one second. Ben Jamal, according to Gideon, he has written to the Chief Superintendent saying that he will be in the vicinity of one of your marches potentially again next week. Will you welcome him?
Well, I don't welcome people with his political views, but he's welcome to counter-protest. He has a right to do that. And, the police have a job of trying to manage the protest and the counter-protest. What Mr. Falter is trying to do, what he was trying to do on Saturday and what he's now encouraging other people to do, is to come to the march to try to disrupt it, to try to stop it progressing, and to seek a confrontation. And what very clear,
put that to him.
People aren't stupid. It's very clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to provoke scenes of disorder.
Okay, we must leave it there, Ben, because I want to bring in Gideon. But thank you for taking the time. Very much appreciated. What do you plan to do on the 27th of April?
Thank you. Well, I plan to walk again. I plan to go for a walk in the vicinity of these marches. I should be allowed to do that. Any Jewish person who wants to do that, anybody who's got friends who are Jewish should feel free to walk with them as well. And the
when does a walk constitute a march?
Well, I suppose if we say, everybody meet here and walk to this particular point, that would be a march. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that if these things are so safe, then we should be allowed to walk. And what Ben Jamal says is absolutely not true. There are not thousands of people, Jewish people, joining his marches. That is just categorically...
You clarified that.
It's categorically untrue.
How many people do you expect to be walking with you next Saturday in the vicinity of a pro-Palestine march?
I don't know. It's up to people to decide if they want to walk, where they want to walk. The thing that I would encourage, though, is for people to walk in the vicinity. And if it's so safe and the policing is so good, then it will be safe for everybody to do so.
Do you think it might be inflammatory?
I mean, I don't think, people have said to me, and Ben Jamal, I heard him saying as well, that I was trying to provoke something. And if you follow that line of argument, then the line of argument has to be that being Jewish publicly in the vicinity of these marches is a provocation, is inflammatory. And it's no different to saying, if a woman wears a short skirt in the vicinity of men, then she brings upon herself anything that happens to her. And
so what we see at the end of this rather testy interview is Gideon's plan that he wants to lead people, or that he wants to encourage people to walk through the streets of London even when there are marches on. And this is a challenge. It's not... I think Ben is mistaken in the way he's responding to this. And I think a lot of comments are mistaken in the way that they're responding. They are identifying Ben... They are identifying Gideon as leading a protest, a counter-protest to the Palestinian march. I don't think that's what he's talking about. He may well want a counter-protest, but that's not what he is proposing, and it's not the language that he is using. The language he is using is to take the statement which has been made by the police that that the Palestinian marches on Saturdays are not making the centre of London a no-Jew-go area. That it's perfectly possible for Jewish people to move around London freely, and that they are protected. What Gideon is saying is that is not the case, and he wants to demonstrate that fact. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable statement, and I think he's right that that is not the fact. So this is not about a counter-protest. This is about taking the police at their word and taking Parliament at its word that London is not hostile to Judaism and to Jewish people on Saturdays. The centre of London is not a no-go area. And I think that should be supported. And the distortions which are being made to his campaign are I suppose, reasonable when we're looking, when we're dealing with people who are interested in actions and counter actions. This is neither an action nor a counter action. This is simply taking the police word seriously. And the policeman who was on duty last Saturday was clearly under the misapprehension, that Gideon Falter was a counter activist, was staging his own counter demonstration. Actually, all he was doing was taking the police at their word. And their word was that he had to move on. Their word was that if he didn't move on, he would be arrested. Now, that is a challenge, and that, I think, is bully boy thuggery by the police. Please, call me out. Tell me I'm wrong. If he wanted to stage a counter demonstration, that's another matter. And Ben is quite right. There are a significant number of people, I don't think it runs into the thousands, significant number of Jewish people who quite rightly join those marches, because those marches are against Netanyahu. They're not against Israel, or at least that's the aim. And there may even be Jewish marchers who are against Israel itself. I don't know. But the confusion of issues is something which is easy when people are marching and waving slogans, and not everybody, I'm sure, on the march necessarily espouses every slogan that is being waved. And equally, I think it's entirely right and proper that people should be given the opportunity to march, and indeed, in so many ways, I would sympathise with that march. But I equally think that one should take it very seriously when the police say that that this is a safe space. It clearly is not a safe space if, in order to have that safety, somebody is threatened with arrest. That's not dealing with things in a courteous way. That is thuggery, and it is bullying, and it is wrong, and it needs to be called out.